Thanks, Ciarán Comhairle. I'm not going to take from the fact that this budget has spread funding across various departments and agencies, and that there will be a benefit throughout the country in the context of the manner in which you have approached the budget itself. And while you're here, Minister Riley, may I say to you that in relation to the childcare package, I want to draw your attention to a submission which was given to you from a group in Carlow in relation to the commercial rates on the private operators, and they're extremely concerned that the rate burden is difficult for them, and that in some way across the other department in terms of environment that there should be an effort made to reduce that burden, because they're giving a direct service to your department and they're fully reliant on any of the funding that comes from the department and could be classified as educational establishments rather than what they are, and that would be a help to them. And likewise in relation to Minister Donoghue, who is here, and I respect the job that he is doing and acknowledge what has been done in relation to a sector that I'm familiar with, which is the transport sector. And to take the initiative that he has taken in relation to road tax is significant for that sector directly. But it will also have an impact on those that use the sector now extensively, and it will improve the cost base for hauliers who are travelling here to the UK and Europe, and who are servicing our market of exports, which is essential to the upturn in the economy. But I have to go back to the 2011 election, because in that election we came from a period where old tribalisms were well established in politics, and where there was a need for a shift in terms of how we do political business in this country, and indeed in terms of how we account for ourselves, both in this House here and how the system accounts for itself in terms of the Comptroller and Auditor General and so on. Reforms were absolutely necessary. And what you told the electorate in that time, in terms of the promises that you made and the reform package that you put before them, and the discussion about a democratic revolution, I have to tell you, you have fallen way short of that mark. And you have disappointed so many people throughout Ireland that you did not use the huge numbers that you have in terms of government support to bring about the reforms that are absolutely necessary. I saw those reforms in politics. I've been here in '97, and I see that those reforms are still needed in the context of how we do our business in this House, how politics is done generally, how we're perceived out there needs a lot of attention, because that results in the reform-driven agenda that is so necessary in the context of managing budget figures and indeed auditing those figures over the years. I have to say that this budget is a sort of a nickels and dimes approach to a whole sector of departments and agencies, where the only real big message that came out of it was in fact Minister O'Donoghue's tax agenda for road tax, that is, and the effect that it will have on the haulage. The rest is spread too thinly across society and across sectors within that society to have any real impact. And the changes that were necessary in terms of that reform that I spoke about didn't come about, and as a result of that we have the same type of budget process, we have the same tribalism within the political parties that exist in this House, and we have the same approach in terms of protecting the status quo. So that nickel and dime approach will not buy the next election for you, because the public out there are of the same mind as they were in 2011 in relation to change and reform. They want to see their lives being considered in this House. They want to know that the problems that they face are concerns of ours, and they want to know that we understand those concerns. So when I say to you, in terms of social welfare, that it was very little for those people that are on that level of income, I want to take the example given to me by a Michael from Kilkenny, who left me this note at my clinic last Saturday. He says his household benefit was thrashed, 6 weeks fuel allowance gone, 100 units of ESB cut, a cut in his fuel allowance, €23 now down to 20, and then he has his household charge, his septic tank charge, his property tax, he has to pay his car tax, his petrol has risen, €280 to be paid to school for a child starting without uniform or shoes or anything else in terms of that consideration, a cut in the back to school allowance, cut in his child benefit as well. I know that will be increased marginally in this budget, but he's getting €29, he says, a week to look after a 13-year-old girl, and he's on contributory pension. Now, after that then, he has all of the usual bills, whether it's refuse, gas, coal, light and heat and so on, and €350 for the bus to take the child to school, and home insurance of €310. So the increase that he will experience after this budget is nothing in the context of the real figures that he has to deliver on in terms of his household income and the draw on that income, which is substantial. So his quality of life and the quality of life of his family will not be improved by this budget. And that is a real, tangible example of spreading too thinly across all of the different sectors. This man's boat has not risen. The other issue I would take with the budget is in relation to entrepreneurs, and great play was made of it. And let's define that. The entrepreneurs that we're speaking about are the men and women and families in this country that have created 750 to 800,000 jobs and have sustained themselves through thick and thin in this economic downturn. And for the ones that are still there, they are anxious to participate in the creation of jobs. They want to be successful in their business. And the biggest single drawback to them is the attitude of government towards the SME sector. And what you have done in terms of looking at the tax of an employer versus an employee is marginal. It is nothing. Yes, it acknowledges their position after years of turning a blind eye to it. But it doesn't help them in the course of this recession. And let me tell you what one man texted to me yesterday. Now, I agree with the minimum wage. I agree with improving people's lives, and I agree with helping. But the intervention of government can often distort negatively what is happening in a small business. And most small businesses today, the ones that are successful, the ones that have come through the difficulties and that are still with us, have bank debt, legacy debt, and then presumably a small debt to try and tie them over and keep them competitive and active in the marketplace. So this man says to me, your 50-cent increase in terms of the minimum wage adds €15,600 to his wage bill at a time when he can't afford it. He sometimes takes home less than what his employees are taking home. And then he adds that the insurance industry is now so out of control in terms of its costs that this year alone, added to his expense, is €6,000 in terms of insurances for his business. That is what is happening out there on the ground, and you have failed in any significant way to address that. So small businesses up and down this country, under pressure, in the high streets, closing down, and nothing to offer them. And I notice in the consultation comment that's made about consultation that not one word is said about commercial rates. And the commercial rate is the most unfair tax that you could have on a small business. And it's talked about most times in budgets. It's talked about inside this House, outside this House. But we have not given the political leadership that's necessary to reduce those rates and to bring in an ability to pay clause, or indeed an ability to pay on profit clause. That is not good enough. And that attitude, Deputy Coveney, from you, of your councillors are actually in the majority, and they want to increase the commercial rate.
Thank you.
And what's needed is a policy that will correct from the centre what has been collected unfairly from the ones that are creating the employment in this country of 800,000 people, as I said earlier on. Mention was made of NAMA and the provision of houses. Well, if you look at the figures, Count Corda, that have been mentioned, 20,000 units up to 2020. That's 4,000 per year, and 90% of those are in Dublin, and 400 then for the rest of the country. Well, look at Kilkenny, 3,500 on our waiting list. Now, these figures are massaged because when you look at HAP or when you look at the other schemes that are there, they are considered to be adequately housed and therefore not on the housing list. No account is taken of those that are in hotels or those that are sleeping on our streets. And every single county has that particular problem. But the Minister decides 90% of these houses would be for Dublin. Let's look at what NAMA did offer. NAMA offered 6,569 units. This is not me saying it, this is NAMA. And 2,500 units is all that was taken up from that offer. So I ask you, what is happening, Minister, in relation to that? What is Alan Kelly, the Minister, doing in relation to that? I believe that there is a significant number of small builders that, have given the proper opportunity, would help to deliver houses on the ground with the support of each and every local authority. And that is the direction that we should be going in. Look back to the 1950s and onwards, and it was the big housing estates that were built by the local authorities that to this day remain the successful centrepiece of housing our people through this country. And that's what we should be looking at. Look at the mortgage arrears has not been dealt with. 17,000 repossession orders exist. Now, these are people that are going to be dumped on the street, dumped onto the housing list, with no solution for them. And we haven't addressed that in this. 38,000 mortgage holders in arrears for over a 2-year period. Can you just imagine the hardship that these people are going through, while the banks refuse, in some cases, to deal with them, refuse to understand their difficulty and their plight? And it will take a strong intervention from government to make those banks come to heel, because they are not assisting those families. They have no respect for them. They have no respect for the government. And as soon as they become better off in terms of their bottom line, they will absolutely ignore you, get back onto the same game that they were on before, ignore the citizen. And where stands your 2011 democratic revolution, where the people were coming front and centre to everything? The other side of this budget has never been touched. Never been touched. And I want to relate to a question, Count Corla, that I asked you, that I asked the Taoiseach rather, and you suggested I put down a parliamentary question. I'm asking that question now. You're here, Minister, representing the Cabinet, the Government. And I'm asking you this. All of this money that's been allocated, €13.5 billion, for example, to health. Well, let's see what happens that. Let's see what happens that. Apart from the chaos that there is on our trolleys and the waiting lists around the country, and I can give you the example of a waiting list in Waterford, sent for attention to CAPA, couldn't deal with it, sent it back to Waterford again. Waterford then sent it to Whateven. And to this day, it's hard to find out where the patient is on that waiting list. Now, that is unforgivable of any government, because these people are waiting in pain to get this job done, whatever the operation might be, whatever the procedure might be. So you've allocated €13.5 billion. Now, I suggested to Mr O'Brien that he wasn't up for the job, that maybe he should say that to the Minister, and maybe the Minister should get somebody else. He accused me of that being a political statement. It wasn't. It was an honest-to-God statement in relation to the fear and frustration that I have for the management of the health services, which I believe is out of control. Middle to senior management in the health services have no real direction, and the system is being held together The band-aid of that system is the nurses and doctors that work tirelessly, day and night, to keep it together. They will not see much from this budget, but the senior management and upwards will. So let's have a look at this. Recently, the Comptroller and Auditor General had to tell the health services that they owed small businesses €9 million in compensation because they didn't pay them in time. And the health service tried to wriggle its way out of that. But that is a stated fact. In 2013, 2014, and again this year, the Comptroller and Auditor General has had to draw attention to the fact that the procurement rules are by and large being ignored by the HSE, and that there are issues for them to address. There was a further issue in relation to the settlement of tax, which is somewhere in the region of €4 million, and the compliance performance in relation to procurement rules is significantly in difficulty. There are consultants who have failed to sign off on operations. Management have failed to secure their signature in order for them to claim for operations and procedures in hospitals from the private health insurance to the tune of €290 million. Not my figures, the figures from the CNAG. The audit vote for 2014 for the Garda Síochána, failure to comply with procurement rules. That is what he said, the CNAG. Vote 25, community and local government. Taxpayers' money not applied to the projects it was intended for, €691,000. It goes on. And if you look at the postal code system, which was to cost €18 million, is now costing €38 million, and the Revenue Commissioners say that they will not use it. Now, in local government, the Public Accounts Committee, the Comptroller and Auditor General, does not audit a significant sum of money that goes down to the local government system, through the local government system. So I'm asking you this, Minister. Will you, as a government, bring forward the appropriate reforms that are necessary for the CNAG to carry out his duties to the extent that he wants to, and to the extent that the people expect him to, and will you give him the powers and indeed the funding to ensure that forensic examinations can be undertaken of the expenditure of this government or any government? This is not a political point. This is a point in relation to the administration of this state, which is failing you as a government and is failing the taxpayer who contributes 45 or 50 billion euros a year. And we're not getting value for money. And it's a simple thing to do. And I'm asking you, amalgamate the local government audit system and the Comptroller and Auditor General's office, give them all the appropriate powers that they need to conduct their inquiries right across government agencies and departments, to fund them properly, and to ensure that they follow the taxpayers' money to the point where it's being spent. That's all I'm asking for. It's not for me. It's for the government. It is for the proper management of this state, so that we can get some closure on the inefficiencies and the failures of the state that cause you to have to collect more taxes than what you might need if those failures were corrected. Now, what is wrong with that? In fact, former Minister Rabbitte, when he was a former member of the Public Accounts Committee, suggested many of these things. And the first action when I came into this House was to bring forward a bill that might enable that to happen. And you refused to support it. In spite of the fact, and Minister Noonan will tell you this, he was a former chair of that committee, every week he would lead the committee to the AV room and he would give a press conference as to the extreme waste and inefficiencies in the system. And do you know what, Minister? That's still going on. And I am a taxpayer. I am, or was, a business person, small businessman. And they look in aghast at the fact that we don't address these issues. It might make your budget figures a hell of a lot easier, but that doesn't happen. And I'm asking that you would consider bringing forward something to the Cabinet to ensure that these changes take place. There are lots of examples. These are but a few. But remember this, it's simple to capture them in an independent way. Look every single year at the returns from the CNAG. Look in the Department of Marine at the leases that were never signed, the money that was never collected, and the way people were treated. And it tells its own story. And finally, Count Corder, can I just say this? There are times when the state wrongs an individual, and instead of owning up to it, it will head for the status quo, the safety and comfort of hiding behind the system. And the devastation that has brought, that attitude has brought to individual people and families in the country is nothing short of shocking and a disgrace.
Thank you.